Okay, so this video is women of color are not respected and they're not treated as white women are. And there was a march that happened more recently, a march, it was in regard to Black females and the treatment of Black females. And so there are scenes from the Black Women's March that were captured by a Mark Vergari and Tania Savayan. This was in Tarrytown, New York. New York State police officers blocked protesters participating in a Black women's march from crossing a bridge on Saturday. It angered the organizers. And so I'm going to go down because it pops off every now and then, you know, the feed. So police block Black Women's March protesters from crossing New York Bridge. Now, there was a women's march, and the women's march was led by basically white women. And with the women's march, what happened with that was highly publicized. You had famous people that were speaking out. It was all over the news, and it was viewed as um, a national event, and a lot of people participated in it. How many people knew about the Black Women's March? Some people are just now finding out there was one even that it existed. And so that tells you right there as white women are. And so filing and bigotry and stereotypes just the same, maybe if not even more so, than Black males. And they are also killed by the police, but it's never really talked about and viewed as much as, you know, only like if it's something that someone pulls up and they come out and say something about it, like the Sandra Bland case. And there's been other Black women who have been murdered by the police, but you don't hear about it unless somebody lines all of the people up. And then you say, oh, I didn't know she was murdered by police as well. And so this was in Tarrytown, New York, that New York State police officers blocked protesters participating in a Black women's march from crossing a bridge on Saturday. So this angered organizers. So march leaders had prepared for arrests earlier in the day after learning they wouldn't be permitted to cross. And so the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, formerly known as Tappan Zee Bridge or Tappan Zee Bridge. The event organized 100 Sisters and Black Lives Matter Hudson Valley was aimed at bringing attention to the issues facing Black women in suburban and rural New York communities. So, however, it was declared as an unlawful assembly by the state police. So, in a statement, police said they strongly support the rights of any group to peacefully march and express their freedom of speech. But police said, I guess this had to do with the proposal rather than anything else. So, I'm going to go up here because sometimes, let's see if I can go up this way. If I go up that way, it usually takes me off. So you see a woman pictured here. And so I'm going to
Amendment right. Just like we have the right to get the flag.
And so she has her an African flag, and she has a statement that she made, and basically it doesn't go into any deeper detail than that. She is pictured here in the corner, so I don't know if it'll come back. But anyway, okay, so police said that the proposed march across the bridge posed a threat to marchers' safety. So still under construction, the bridge's bike and pedestrian paths are not open, and the police said anyone who attempted to cross would be arrested. And so they're using that as the reason why that they were blocking the effort. So, okay. So the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge carries an interstate highway with heavy traffic volumes traveling at high speeds, that is, and also remains an active construction zone. The police statement read that this type of event presents significant safety issues for the marchers and drivers and members of law enforcement. So at 10:30 a.m., police officers outnumbered the marchers holding signs, tuba, trumpet, and drums. So Alicia Murphy Wartell of Croton-on-Hudson, New York, was one of the first to arrive, together with her 2 young children and her friend. Murphy Wartell said that she explained the significance of the march to her kids on the drive over. So as a white person, we are here to support our Black community members, she said. I told my son that it's important to stand up for people who are treated unfairly. At 11 a.m., nearly 100 people were there. In the moments before the march, it was unclear if anyone would attempt to cross the bridge, which crosses the Hudson River and is located a few miles north of New York City. And so I'm trying to jump around here a little bit. So it goes on to say that Green said that there were marchers who were prepared to be the first to cross the and prepared to get arrested as well. So they were going to still cross despite getting arrested. And so let me go on. Following the rally, marchers were met by dozens of state, county, and Tarrytown police, who together with the police cruisers and county plow trucks blocked the off-ramp. So look at all those police presence, said the marcher Ali Muhammad. They are ready to arrest people, and they could have made this happen, he said, referring to the success of the march. So in other words, they pretty much touted that the police could have escorted people, maybe made it a little safer, so that they did the crossing, but they instead were ready there to arrest people. And so it was met with that type of scrutiny. So many protesters squared off with the police officers, the barricade, and chanted Kumo Selma. Others shot video of their cell phones, of what was going on, and slowly the crowd inched forward until marchers and officers began shoving each other. So it became a shoving match. No arrests or injuries were reported, that is. Although Black Women's March never did achieve its goal of crossing the bridge, some marchers called the protest a success anyway, because they made the effort to do so. I feel like it was a very effective, informal, unofficial march that the people who are concerned about equal rights and institutional racism came out to participate in, said Patricia O'Keefe, New Rochelle, New York. So I'll try to inch up a little bit in the article. So enough police came out today and enough press came out today that we did manage to get people's attention, she said, but did they understand what the reason was for them coming out or us coming out? Will people reflect on that reason why all the police and the press came out? Following the march, state police issued another statement. The state previously communicated the event organizer or with communicated to the event organizer that the bridge is an active construction zone and highway, and that to ensure the safety of the event participants and drivers, foot traffic, any kinds is prohibited. So that was what the statement read. According to these release, police offered several alternatives of crossing the bridge on foot, including other bridges and roads. We are glad today's event was peaceful and respectful, the statement reads. And so that's pretty much the article. And so this is a woman, I guess she attended the march, she was a part of it, and the video kind of cut off shortly. So I don't know if I can bring it back up. I was going to try to make an attempt to do so. So if there's a technical difficulty, I may not be able to bring that video up. But basically, she didn't really say very much. She just said her part of why she was there, and she showed how she was dressed, and she had an African and things like that. So the same things that happen in media, in white media, for white women and Black women. You notice that? And so that, you know, they had to put a statement as to why they had to secure the bridge and keep people from crossing. But they wanted to clean it up because they didn't want to make it seem like, oh, we're really trying to police Black women, and we're really trying to stop them in their effort of doing their march. But basically, there probably was the problem with the bridge, and they were trying to keep people safe, and maybe they didn't have a permit, so they did say it was informal, and so that might have been why they were saying that, because they wanted to make sure that there were no, you know, fatalities, no accidents and what have you. But you notice this didn't get as much press coverage. It didn't get as much, I don't believe it got as much attention as the women's march. This one was the Black women's march, but the women's march was all on the news. It was all on TV, and it was pumped up. And so that's just to give you a clue as to how Black women are viewed in society, that there is no real support, you know, so not enough. There's support, but there's no greater support in terms of, you know, you don't get this big following like they did with the women's march. And so, and I attended the women's march. Now, I have not seen anybody organize a Black women's march in some of the other neighborhoods. And maybe they're afraid, they're in fear that there's going to be some kind of retaliation or backlash. Usually things have to be, you know, you have to get a permit, and you have to, you know, you get some types of paperwork and street closures or something. If you're holding an event, you have to get something from the city saying that they can hold it on a particular weekend or whatever day, and that they kind of are alerted that this event is taking place from what time to what time is going to be, and all of that. And so you have to get city permission and all that, and permits and whatnot. But anyway, with that being said, I just wanted, you know, to put this out because I don't think many people even realized this was happening. You know, it wasn't as widely talked about as much. There wasn't a wide, you know, show of support is what I'm saying for this event. And so, and if there's other events, you know, I guess maybe learning a lesson from this one, maybe they would make sure that everything is already set up and put in the works so that there won't be these interruptions, and it won't stop short of the event in and of itself, because women of color are not really respected in the same way as white women are. And even in, you know, some instances of protests, like, you know, I know these are just teenagers, but, you know, where were the Black girls speaking out? you know, about their experiences in their neighborhoods. I'm sure that some have had some experiences that are quite different than their white girls in their neighborhood. And talk about an immediate incident rather than what other people's experiences have been, and get these people from neighborhoods where there is a lot of shooting and crime and violence, and find out what their experiences are like when they're in these neighborhoods and what they do and what they've had to do. Some kids have had to walk to school in neighborhoods that have been, they've come up from seeing gun violence, people getting killed in the street. I've come up from that. I've seen that. When people get killed in the street, you never see that. It's never really in the paper, and it's never on the news. And if it's in that neighborhood and it's primarily a Black or Latino neighborhood, you never see that in the news. It has to be something extremely horrific before it gets to news. But there's always horror in certain neighborhoods, but you never see it. You never see it. And I remember as a kid growing up, like when I was a teenager in Inglewood, when people would get murdered, I'm like, I'm sure it's going to make the news. It would never make the news. It was like, oh, well, that's just another Black person dead, or whatever. And so that's the way it was looked at. And so you begin to get callous, not in the way of that, you get to callous where you're used to seeing people get killed. You're used to seeing people get gunned down. You're used to, and the talk is, oh, you got to be in before a certain time at night. If it starts to get dark, and what we used to hear when we were kids is be in the house before the street lights come on. And so our mothers would tell us these things, but it was to protect us because of some of this violence that would happen. And the police rarely would show up. And then if they did show up, they would show up after the damage is done. And so a lot of it, you would make calls, you couldn't get through. I remember this. And then when you finally get through, they ask you dumb things like, well, what's your address? It was like, we know our address shows on the screen. You know where we're at. It's like they wait until the last moment. And then by that time you get frustrated, you drop the phone, and then you go out there, the damage is already done. They're throwing a sheet over a body. And then you have to wait hours and hours for a coroner to show up, the coroner truck. And, it was over and done with. And then the police, when they do come out, they might yellow tape the area, and then they have the ambulance, whatever, people for anybody that might have been injured. But other than that, you never see that stuff really make the news. And so I was surprised I wasn't really surprised, but I was looking, that Parkland thing. I'm thinking to myself, well, where are the Black kids and the Latino kids who probably are in neighborhoods where they see this all the time? Some of us have seen it, and this is nothing to us. We've seen this kind of violence. And if somebody's got a mental illness, if somebody had a domestic dispute or whatever, if somebody's, there's a robbery or something around the corner or whatever. And so but you're silenced. You're silenced because you're Black. You're silenced because you're a Latina. You're silenced because what your feelings are doesn't matter. It's what other people look good in the media, and they're on the Time cover magazine looking like models. They want to hear them. They don't want to hear people who actually really live in battle zones. They don't want to hear that, because then the truth comes out, because then you have to include, we call the police, they never come. Anybody that knows that lived in that time, there were rappers, there was a group called Public Enemy that, and I know people think of him as a joke, but Flavor Flav did a song called 911. 911 is a joke. And the reason why he did that song is because there's a lot of situations where we would call 911 in those neighborhoods, in those communities where there was gun violence. And there was things happening, and Black women lived in those communities when they were girls growing up. And your voice was never important. It's never important. We don't want to hear what you got to say, even though you're living right there in it. And so this is, and so I'm not surprised when you see this police block Black Women's March protesters. So every time I look at these things, I'm like, I'm in some ways, I'm not really surprised by it at all. But in other ways, you want to see, okay, what is the excuse they're going to come up with to say, well, we really didn't mean to block them. So they come up, they say, okay, well, the bridge needed fixing, blah, 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 but there was a guy in the article, he said, they could have helped us. They could have helped, even like when they said there are other bridges, other things they could have, that people could have crossed. Well, if they knew that, how come they weren't willing to help? So that brings up the other question, but they're Black women. See, this is the Black Women's March. And so that's the reason why. So anyway, those are important facts to bring out. But with that being said, I think that's the reason why Black women too feel like we're ignored a lot of times in everything, basically, because they don't have enough of us speaking out, or they don't invite us to talk about the things that we experienced as when we were growing up. Some of us have grown up and come from these neighborhoods, and we've seen people. I'll just tell you, I've seen people get gunned down in the street, literally gunned down, point blank, bullets, everything flying, and we've had to duck. There's been times that we had to get underneath, a bed or a table, and the guns are going off. I can recall an incident, and I was as young as 9 years old, and I was living at the time. I was at my aunt's house, and there were a group of people that used to hang out in front of a building. And I remember the address of the building, and it was right on Western. This is in the LA area. And as kids, we like to go outside and play, just like normal kids. You want ice cream truck, you go outside and play, you got bikes, toys. And so this is what I've experienced. It was starting to get late, and then there were a group hanging out there, and there were a group of guys that got out the car, and they all had long coats, long, big coats. But the reason why they had the long, big coats, because they had assault style weapons in the coats. Nobody saw that coming. And so the guy, I guess there was an interaction or argument over a drug deal that went wrong or something. Somebody didn't give somebody something, and they were upset over it. And at the time, I was about 9 years old. And so I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was a horrific event. And so the next thing, I heard the guy arguing to another guy, and it was down below. And I'm looking out the window, and I'm like listening to the arguing going on, because I think other people started to take notice, because when you hear somebody arguing and then they get really heated and ignited, it draws an audience. And so I'm listening to the arguing, and then the guy, he pretty much gave him an ultimatum. He said, if you all are standing out here in the next 5 to 10 minutes and we come back, you're going to wish you weren't standing out here. And so I guess they didn't take these go right or whatever. These guys were really serious. And so they left, in a group of them left in some cars, and then it was quiet for a while. And then you seen this group down there, they were laughing, and they were kind of drinking and joking about, oh, they're not going to do anything to us, and they're not coming back. And then shortly thereafter, a carload of people started pulling up. And it was the same guys, and they had these same long coats. And so they stood dead in the middle of Western, I believe, Boulevard, standing there. And they pulled out these long, what looked like probably the same types of weapons that they had during the Parkland shooting. They pull them out, and there were about 3 guys standing there, and they just started spraying all along the building, spraying up the building, all around the side of the building. And the guys took off running because whatever didn't go right, they were killed. They didn't mind killing people at that point in time. If you were out there, you were going to get shot. You're going to get killed. And so you could just hear bullets just, I think it might have been more than 20 bullets, more than that went off that evening. And people were calling the police. They were scared. You just were shaking, because you didn't know where these bullets could land. And I remember my mother was like, get on the floor, get on the floor, get on the floor. And we were shaking and scared. And then next thing you know, we were like, did you get the phone to call the police? And everybody around the area, you could hear the bullets. It was really crazy. It was like you felt like you were in some war-torn country. And we were thinking, well, where's all the police? Where's the police at? No police. Nobody was around. And, not even in the area. You would think a police would hear and be like, let's get over there. There's something going on over there. The police didn't come until way after it was over with. And when they did, they yellow taped everything off. And I don't know if anybody was killed that night. We were too scared to go out as children. And that was not the first time I seen an incident like that happen. And so in knowing that, I've seen a lot of death. I've seen there was a morning that we had to get up and get ready to go to school. And I'm looking down under the stairwell and there's blood. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, what's that? I'm thinking it was from some kind of fight the night before or whatever, from some people hanging out. Come to find out there's a person underneath there. And I went up to ask my mom. I said, Mom, somebody's under here and there's blood. And she rushed me in the house and she called the police and everything. And it was a dead body under there. And so I've seen a lot of stuff and it didn't make the news. I wasn't on the Time magazine cover. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of death. I've seen death from even domestic dispute on up to gang violence, on up to police even being brutally physical with people in the neighborhood. They rough them up. I had known somebody who lived next to us, and he was a gang member. And at the time, this was in the 80s, and I think I was about 11 years old when this happened. And he said that he was just walking in the alley, and because he was a gang member, they had pictures of people and they kind of knew their MO, kind of knew who they were. He said that all his teeth were knocked out, top and bottom, from police officers just roughing him up from him walking through the neighborhood. And so he had all his teeth were gone. They knocked them all out. And there were a lot of things that, we would see happen, and it never made the Time cover. It never made the news. And so I'm just curious as to when they're going to give Black children a chance that come from these neighborhoods like Chicago to come out and speak out on what their experiences have been. Because there's been some things that I can recall back when I was even 4 years old that have been implanted in my mind that I'll never forget. And it didn't make the news. And it was gun violence. And, it's like those neighborhoods and those areas, it's those people's problem is the way it was looked at. And so that's why when I hear this one incident happening, do you know how many times I've seen that? And it didn't make the news. So anyway, these Black women are marching for a lot of different reasons, but some of it is from what I'm talking about. profiling, the violence, things that happen in Black communities that happen to Black women. You know, there's many times I could have been killed because I was in these neighborhoods. And you never hear the reporter asking you to speak out. They always want to get it from somebody who's not even in the area, who doesn't know, who's clueless as to what's going on. But with that being said, I thought this was an important thing to bring out because I want to hear one day when they actually ask people what their experiences have been that grew up in these neighborhoods where, back in the 80s, I grew up in that area where there was crack in these neighborhoods, and there, the Crips and Bloods, the gun violence was the steady flow of guns in these neighborhoods, and the Black people didn't put those guns in the neighborhoods. They didn't put those guns in the neighborhood, but they were able to access them for sure. And, police who would literally get paid off to turn their back away from what was going on in the neighborhoods. Yeah, we know about it because we had friends, even though we're not in the gang, you had friends of friends who were in gangs would tell us, the police paid us money so that we can control this street. And so you never hear our side of the story. You only hear the exterior. People who don't know what's really going on, and they just talk out the side of, outside of what's really happening because they don't really feel the effects or the brunt of what goes on a daily basis in some people's lives, what they experience. We used to, every weekend, we could expect somebody to get it, and that's my way of saying somebody would get killed. Sometimes it wasn't every weekend. Every night there was something going on. There was a gunshot. And then we had those helicopters that would be flying around. They weren't just the airport we were close to, but we would hear police helicopters, and they would shine lights all in through the neighborhood because they were always searching for somebody that was involved in some kind of what they call 187. And so anyway, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening.